Welcome back to the Barrels Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. We are in full off-season mode when it comes to the NBA, but it's time to look back on this NBA season and kind of give these teams an official grade on what I believe they've done this NBA season, but also giving them one thing I would like to see them do for the future in this offseason. But before we get into that, we're going to be starting off with the Eastern Conference in this episode. The Western Conference will be a separate episode. Make sure you guys leave a like on the video. Helps channel out a ton, and don't forget to subscribe. We're going to be posting a ton of NBA offseason content in the coming weeks and months, and once we get back into the NFL season, we'll be posting our weekly episodes like we did this past NFL season. But without further ado, we can get right into the Boston Celtics. So Boston Celtics, obviously, this is going to be an easy grade. I got an A++ for them. They won a championship, 64-18, dominated the entire regular season and postseason. I was trying to think of their record that I heard it was throughout the entire course of everything. I think it was like 80 and like 17 or 18 or something like that. But there really isn't too much to talk about. Obviously, the best team in basketball throughout the entire season. Phenomenal performances in the finals by Jaylen Brown. I feel like every single star that they have had a game of their own. It was Kristaps Porzingis in game one. Then it was like a mix of Derek White and Drew Holiday in game two. Then JB had his game. Tatum ended up getting going late in the series. They were just a bad matchup for Dallas. They played a team that, in my opinion, matched up with them perfectly in terms of how Dallas likes to play offensively, especially being able to switch multiple different positions. I mean, they got 3 to 4, depending on who you're talking to, all NBA level defenders on that team. And then you have a great rim protector in Kristaps Porzingis on the back end, even though he was hurt for most of the series. But looking at this, is obviously an A++ for me. Easy grade right here. One thing I do want to go see them do is go look to add some size, maybe a backup wing, or even looking at that big spot. I know they have the 30th pick in the draft, and I want to say they have another late second. Just go add some depth. I think when you look at that wing position, this Boston Celtics team, I mean, was really, really healthy all year outside of Kristaps Porzingis. But when you're looking at that, injuries are a thing in basketball. I would like to see them go out and try to add some depth throughout the draft, just to have somebody on your back end of your bench that can be an athletic wing that can switch multiple positions and defend. I really like Ryan Dunn for them, even though he doesn't have the offensive intangibles yet in his game. I feel like him defensively, with being just a great point of attack defender, I mean, that would make Boston really, really hard to play if they had another guy off the bench that can just switch 1 through 4. And I think Ryan Dunn can do that. But just them adding more size to that backup big spot, I don't know what Al Horford's going to do, if he's going to retire or not, or if he's going to try to get the run back one more time. And then also adding some size possibly at that wing position is the only thing I really want to see Boston do. Other than that, they got their whole top 5 really under contract for the next couple of years. So I'm not really worried about this Boston team whatsoever. I wouldn't be shocked if they are back in the finals next year. Next team, New York Knicks. Regular season 50-32. I mean, this is a tough loss in Game 7 on your home court, but not going to really look at how the season ended, but we're talking about how the season as a whole. When they traded for OG Anunoby, this team was almost unbeatable at full health. I mean, they had a crazy record when everybody was fully healthy. Julius Randle ends up going down. Then it was like a domino effect from there. Bogdanovich gets hurt on a freak accident really at the start of the playoffs. OG Anunoby ends up getting hurt. Josh Hart gets hurt. Jalen Brunson gets hurt, to the point where their entire starting 5 throughout the year was hurt. When you think of how good guys like DiVincenzo and Josh Hart were playing with this New York Knicks team, I think it goes overlooked that they were supposed to be coming off the bench for this team, right? So looking at that, I just feel like this season is still a very, very good season for the New York Knicks. I give it an A+. I mean, this is a very culture-changing season for what the Knicks have been this really past decade. Getting almost to the conference finals, barring any injuries, I think they go to the conference finals, but they're in a perfect position to run it back. They have contracts to go out and get somebody like a Mikal Bridges, who's been super rumored to the New York Knicks. They have to extend OG Anunoby, give him a new deal. They haven't seen eye to eye on it on early reports from what I've seen, but I have no doubt that they're going to make that deal happen. I think they're trying to also work out contract situations for OG Anunoby to also try to go acquire somebody else. I feel like that's why they might be looked at as being a little not meeting eye to eye, if you will, with OG Anunoby. But all in all, I'm going to give this season an A+ from the New York Knicks. The one thing I want to see them do is kind of like I already went into. Like, I think now is the time to go push all in. I think they have to go push all in this offseason to try to make it work. You have a small window in the NBA to make it work, no matter how good the roster is. The game of basketball, anything can happen. With how close this Knicks team was to going to the conference finals and how hurt they were, beating a Sixers team and almost beating a Pacers team, I think it's a good time for them to try to push all in. I think they have 2 draft picks. They have 2 first rounders this year. Bogdanovich, who's making about $20 million. Mitchell Robinson, who's making about 8 to 12, I want to say. And they could push to go get another guy with getting back OG Anunoby and still having DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride off that bench. They still got to look at bringing back Isaiah Hartenstein unless they want to address the big position in the draft. So it's very interesting. I feel like they're in a great offseason to where, like, the East is so, like, it's the Boston Celtics, and then you're kind of unsure about everybody else below them. But I feel like if the Knicks are fully healthy, I'm probably going to take the Knicks over every other team in the Eastern Conference besides the Celtics. That's just me personally. I just think that the way they play and how they can construct this roster this offseason is going to put them in a great position to run it back and get right back to the situation they were in this year. So I'm giving them my official grade, an A+ for the Knicks. Next team, Milwaukee Bucks. Interesting season. First year of the Dame and Giannis era, 49-33, had a lot of coaching drama throughout the year. Fire Adrian Griffin, bringing in Doc Rivers, and the team got kind of worse record-wise from the start of the season. Another team that had some injury problems, especially towards the back half in the playoffs with Dame and Giannis. Giannis not even playing a single minute in the playoffs. Obviously hurt their chances of even beating the Indiana Pacers. But with all that being said, the first year of Dame and Giannis, when you first really get a superstar caliber player like a Damian Lillard, it usually doesn't always work out the best year one. It usually takes that first year to kind of work things out, and then the second year they come back and they're a lot better. The only instance I can really think of where a team traded for a superstar caliber player and it worked right away was Kawhi Leonard in Toronto. But that trade, they kind of got Kawhi Leonard at such a good value because of how it ended in San Antonio, so where, like, they didn't really have to deplete the rest of their roster in a way. Not saying the Bucks really had to deplete their whole roster, but switching up somebody like a Jrue Holiday and a Damian Lillard, 2 guys that play the same position but play 2 completely different styles of basketball, it's obviously going to take the team a while to readjust, especially because Jrue Holiday's been there for so long, won a championship with this group. But I also think Milwaukee's also to the point where, like, they're just getting old. I feel like they got to kind of have more of an influx in this roster and get more youthful, and that's the one thing I want to see them do this offseason is more so get younger guys to play around Dame and Giannis. I think Brook Lopez is a perfect fit, but I think Brook Lopez is also just getting up there in age. I would like to see Giannis play with a more athletic big. Obviously, Brook Lopez is always going to be able to space the floor, but I just feel like that athleticism in terms of being a rim protector is very needed for this Bucks team that doesn't have the same perimeter defenders and like a Jrue Holiday, switching him out with a Damian Lillard. So, I mean, the perimeter defense has taken a step back. So I'm looking at just getting more youthfulness on the team, trying to address that through the draft. They have the 23rd overall pick. And I really do think that you have to go into this offseason looking at your core and thinking it's Dame, Giannis, and really anybody else can be available. I think that's the mindset that they have to have because you gave up a lot to get Damian Lillard and pair him with Giannis. You would hate to see it go out sad. So I think there's a lot of pressure on this team this offseason to go make the right necessary moves to put this team back into contention to go and win an NBA title. But I'm going to give this official grade. I'm going to give it a C+. I'm not going to be too harsh on it because I went into this season thinking that it was going to be kind of a workout year for Dame and Giannis. This is the first year, and with the whole coaching situation and the coaching change, I'm not going to put that too much on the team. More so front office for the whole coaching situation, but I'm gonna give it a C+. I think this is a fair grade. They were still pretty good record-wise, 49-33. I mean, they were third in the East. They just had injuries. I mean, if they were fully healthy and had Giannis, you could easily see them going to the second round and beating the Pacers. So I would say a C+ is a fair grade. Next team, Cleveland Cavaliers. Hard to say this isn't a disappointing year. I mean, they advanced farther into the playoffs they did the year prior, and with all the injuries they did deal with, Darius Garland being out for a good amount of time, Evan Mobley being out for a good amount of time, and that stretch where they were both out, team really stuck afloat. That was one of the best stretches of Cavs basketball all year. Yes, they didn't really, when you look at the schedule that they played, wasn't really the toughest schedule, but they were able to keep the ship steady while their two out of their big 4 were hurt. I'm gonna give it a C+. It really goes into what they do this all season. It was kind of a weird year because you have these injury teams you have to kind of give the benefit of the doubt for, and the mindset of they might just try to run it back. I've been seeing the Cavs a lot in trade rumors, but like when he goes to the playoffs in the second round, Donovan Mitchell was hurt. Jared Allen didn't play at all in the playoffs. They even beat the Orlando Magic in 7 games, and I feel like this team is just hindered offensively. I feel like they have stretches where if it's not Donovan Mitchell, they're not scoring, right? And I feel like they're going to have an important offseason where they need to pick and choose who is the person they look to trade. I think Jared Allen's obviously the odd man out. We kind of saw glimpses and flurries of Evan Mobley in the playoffs, more so offensively at the 5 spot rather than just being at the 4 with Jared Allen, who can't space the floor at the 5. But I feel like this is a very important offseason for the Cavs. One thing I want to see them do, obviously, like I kind of just got done explaining, rip the Band-Aid off. This is an offseason where you can't just go into the next season with the same kind of nucleus thinking anything is going to change. Boston's going to be right back. The Bucks are probably going to be back. The Sixers have all the cap space in the world to be back. The Knicks are going to be back. That's 4 teams already that I would say are better than the Cavs at full strength. And then you got to think, Orlando almost beat you in 7 games. Obviously, you didn't have Jared Allen, but Orlando almost beat you. Like, there's going to be... if there's a time to really rip the Band-Aid off and look to trade one of your guys to try to get a better fitting roster, if you want to build around Donovan Mitchell, or if you want to get rid of Donovan Mitchell and build around Darius Garland, kind of get younger, have a little step back to have a big step forward kind of year. But I think it's going to be very interesting this offseason. I'm going to give them a C+, kind of in the same mold as the Milwaukee Bucks, because when they did get to the playoffs, their guys were hurt. And it's kind of hard for me to assess how their season ended based on the full season alone, because, like I said, they still had a successful regular season. I mean, 48-34. So, like, finished 4th in the East. Like, these teams are kind of hard to grade because their seasons ended in such a weird way because of the injury luck. Not saying that they would have beat the Boston Celtics if they were fully healthy, but I'm saying, like, with the injuries that came about, it's interesting to see what kind of direction this team goes into, because the Cavs, you could argue they're telling themselves that, man, if we were just healthy, things would have been different. So it's a very interesting thing, but I'm going to give this overall grade a C+. I think it's kind of the same correlation to the Milwaukee Bucks and how their seasons ended. Next team, 5 seed, Orlando Magic, 47-35. This is a Magic team that might be ahead of schedule right now, but looking at their roster, they have some holes, for sure. I think they're definitely ahead of schedule. I think Paul is ahead of schedule, and he's better than many people thought he would be. But they need to address the shooting problems. I feel like in the playoffs, there were times where, and especially in that Game 7, they looked like a young team. In that Game 7 in Cleveland, there was a lot of times where they were up 20, and they were just bad shot after bad shot. That allowed the Cavs to get some momentum, and it kind of spiraled off from there. Donovan Mitchell got it going, and then that series ended up going in the Cavs' favor. So looking at this, I think they definitely had a great year for this young of a team. If you go into the season, nobody probably thought the Orlando Magic was going to take a Cleveland Cavaliers team 7 games in the first round, especially being the 5 seed. I'm going to give it an A+, for sure. I just think the one thing I want to see them do is go make the key additions to make sure that you're ahead of schedule right now. Don't make it to where you end up getting behind schedules because you go into an offseason being passive. I think you need to go address the shooting. There's a number of guys I would love to see this team add. I think Buddy Hield, depending on what his market is going to be like, I think he could be a good add, just a shooter in general. I see Klay Thompson, but I think Klay Thompson's a little too much on the older side, and I feel like he's not somebody you add to this team, and he takes you kind of into that next gear, if you will. One guy I think that they could easily go out and get is a Gary Trent Jr. He still kind of fits their timeline on what they want to do. Not a slouch on defense, can space the floor. He's going to be a free agent this summer out of Toronto. I feel like he would be a great addition to this Orlando Magic team because they need spacing. They have the 18th overall pick. In my recent mock, I had them getting like somebody like Jared McCain, somebody who can come in and be that point guard role and kind of be able to space, and really make things easier on Paolo and Franz. So it's going to be an interesting offseason for them. I'm going to give it an A+. One thing I want to see them do is go make key additions to the team to make sure they stay ahead of schedule rather than falling behind because they play passive in the offseason. Next team, Indiana Pacers, 47-35. What a year for the Pacers. Definitely a culture-changing year for a team that has been looked at as being a mediocre team, as just because they're really consistently fine with being just middle of the pack team in the Eastern Conference, but this is a real culture-changing year. Just paid Pascal Siakam the bag. Tyrese Halliburton started the year phenomenal, one of the best point guards and one of the best players in all of basketball to start the year. Kind of had the hamstring injury, got the mold back going in the playoffs for sure, especially against the Knicks later in that series to push them to the conference finals. And then they obviously ran into the Boston Celtics, which is a tough task for any team, especially like the Indiana Pacers. But A+ year. It has to be an A+ year. This Indiana Pacers team getting all the way to the conference finals. You can say what you want about the road that they took to get to the conference finals with all the injuries. They made it to the conference finals. This is a WW year for the Pacers fans everywhere, and I'm going to give them an A+ for their overall grade. One thing I want to see them do, add more defensive pieces. No matter how good you are offensively, if you can't get stops consistently, it's going to be hard to win in the playoffs. Like I said, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, but their offense was keeping them in games. But turnovers and not being able to get stops are the reason why they ended up losing a lot of close games in the playoffs. So I think they're in a perfect situation where you have Pascal Siakam. I would love to see if you can upgrade from Aaron Nesmith, maybe move Aaron Nesmith to the bench and possibly go out and get a better defending, just a better player at that small forward position in that starting lineup. I love Aaron Nesmith and what he can give you off the bench. Starting wise, not saying I have question marks because I feel like Aaron Nesmith had just had a career year, but I feel like the Indiana Pacers could look to upgrade and use some of their depth to make a trade to upgrade their roster. Like, I think Benedict Mathurin didn't even play in the playoffs or the back half of the year, and he was somebody who was in Rookie of the Year conversations a year ago, and he's a great scorer for them off the bench. Like, and you gotta think like there's young guys on their roster like that aren't even playing. That could be very useful on other like rebuilding teams. And I feel like they could easily get into the market of going and getting possibly like a Mikal Bridges type to pair him up with Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam. So I just want to see this Pacers team kind of upgrade their roster as a whole, see what they can do if they can cash in some of their depth, not all of their depth, but some of their depth and draft capital to see if they can go make a move. Next team, Philadelphia 76ers, 47-35. Like many teams in the playoffs, injuries killed them. Losing to the Knicks in the honestly, what I feel like is the best series in the playoffs in general. I mean, so many close games. So looking at this, I'm going to say this is a solid B- for the 76ers. And just this season alone, I feel like they were able to keep their head afloat. I know they were in the play-in. Joel Embiid missed a ton of time. But I feel like this year you found some formulas to what could possibly work and could possibly get you over that hump in the playoffs. I think Kelly Oubre is a great addition. I mean, he is somebody who I was questionable why he wasn't getting paid earlier in the offseason last year. You bring him in, he has a really bounce back year, even though the year before he didn't even have a bad year at all. He was just playing with the Hornets. So looking at that, I feel like you have kind of found a recipe to kind of what's working. You get another year of great development from Tyrese Maxey. He was phenomenal in the playoffs. He was averaging over 30 a game against the Knicks. Like, this is a very, you might think it's a disappointing year because you lose in the first round, but I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel for the Sixers in terms of what they have learned about themselves this year. And I think they're going into the offseason on a mission with all the cap space they do have to really build a roster. I don't think there's ever been a team more prepared to completely shift and change the roster like Philadelphia has when you have Joel Embiid, who's an MVP caliber player in his prime, and you have Tyrese Maxey, who is a young ascending star. They could really have all the work with the first round draft pick to build the roster as they want with two guys, one of them not even in their real prime yet, and one that is an MVP caliber player. So they have all the flexibility and cap space and draft capital to make the roster as they want it. So I'm going to give this a B-. And I feel like this season, it kind of gave them the blueprint to what they should be looking to do this offseason. Miami Heat, 46-36. Disappointing year. Jimmy Butler gets hurt in the play-in game, but even then, it doesn't matter. For Miami Heat fans everywhere, like, the Miami Heat can't keep relying on, we're just going to be in the play-in, but we're going to make a run to the conference finals. Understandable. They've done it before, for sure. They've done it. But even with Jimmy Butler, if he was healthy, they don't beat Boston this year. So, and I was one of those people, I was like, I don't know if Boston wants to see Miami. Yes, they do. After seeing Boston play in the playoffs and what I've seen from Boston all regular season, that belief that I had is gone. Miami, this roster has capped out. I feel like they've maxed this roster out as much as they can. Because you got to think, if the Miami Heat are fully healthy, I'm still taking the Bucks, Knicks, Sixers, Celtics, maybe the Pacers over them. Like, fully healthy, you got to think about that. It's a disappointing year for Miami. I feel like Tyler Hero is missing months and months at a time throughout the regular season. Bam Adebayo is really the only consistent guy that's fully healthy for them throughout the year. Jimmy Butler's always missing time. Tyler Hero's always missing time. Terry Rozier was hurt in the playoffs. So, like, it's tough. They have good young guys on their bench that fit what they want to do, but I feel like this roster itself has kind of maxed out to a point where like they have to make a move this offseason if they don't, they're kind of going to be in the same situation they were this year. They struggle to score offensively at times. They need more actual shooting. I think they need to get a backup big to be a bigger presence because I feel like Bam Adebayo, yes, is a great defensive big. I think he's one of the best defenders in all basketball, but there are times where he's just going up against bigger players, and they don't really have anybody coming off that bench to kind of give him a different look, possibly put him at the 4, maybe like he gets going more so offensively if you put him at the 4. So like it's definitely interesting to see, but I think Miami, the one thing I want to see them do is really go out and make that trade that they've been rumored to be making. It could be for a star, it could be for a couple of role players, but I feel like every offseason Miami's always rumored this trade, that trade, and it never ends up happening. I feel like Miami is at this point, there's this core and what they have going with the Jimmy Butler era, and you've seen talks about Jimmy Butler possibly leaving. I think they need to go make that trade this offseason. That's the one thing I want to see them do. Go rip the Band-Aid off, go make that trade that they've been rumored to be making for how many years now. They're always rumored in every single trade, it seems like, going into the offseason. Go make a move, Miami. You have to go make a move. But overall grade, I'm going to give it a D. This is a disappointing season for Miami. Very disappointing. Number 9, Chicago Bulls. 39-43. I'm going to give this grade a C. I'm going to give it a C. I feel like the one thing that has saved this grade from not being lower is Coby White. Coby White, the development of Coby White in the breakout year that he just had has saved this grade for the Chicago Bulls for me. I mean, looking at this, now you're looking at Coby White is like, okay, we have something to actually build around now. We have something that we can put pieces around and be better. We can go into a new era of Chicago Bulls basketball. Not saying you got to like not bring back DeMar DeRozan and go completely young, but like Zach LaVine is out the door. I'm doing everything I can to try to trade Zach LaVine because he obviously doesn't fit what you want to do. You have a ton of guards already in Sumu, Caruso, Coby White, Lonzo Ball's rumored to be coming back at the start of next year. So your guard room is pretty heavy, and Zach LaVine doesn't really fit what direction you're going into. So, and I feel like the Bulls have a ton of guys that they can move. Like you could probably get a first for Caruso. You could probably get something for Zach LaVine, obviously. Vooch, you could probably get something for, even though I like him in the spacing he can provide you, depending on if they get a big in the draft. So, like, I think they're in a very good situation now, but this grade is being saved by Coby White. I want that to be known. Like, if Coby White doesn't have the breakout year that he has, we're looking at another really, really disappointing year for the Chicago Bulls and another time where they're holding, like, sitting on their hands and not blowing the team up when they probably should have done this years ago. But I'm going to give it a C. I'm going to be generous to the Chicago Bulls because of the development and the breakout of Coby White. Number 10, Atlanta Hawks. Get to our first F of the video. First F of the video, 36-46. Terrible year. I had high hopes for this Hawks team. I thought they were going to be easily be in the playoff. Not even, 10 seed in the play-in, and they got handled by the Chicago Bulls in that playing game. So this is a terrible year for the Hawks. A bunch of questions. A bunch more questions. Interesting offseason. They got graced with the number 1 overall pick. Interested to see what they do with that. Looking at that, there's a bunch of rumors about trades. Is DeJounte Murray going to get traded? With Clint Capella going to be traded? What are they going to do with Trae Young? Is Trae Young going to get traded? I'm not trading Trae Young if I'm the Atlanta Hawks. He's the best player they've had in a very, very long time. You don't just trade him and think you're going to go draft another Trae Young. So looking at that, I'm going to give it an F. I really thought Quinn Snyder was going to be able to save this team, but this team is just poorly constructed. I think they definitely need to go into the offseason and make some moves. One thing I want to see them do this offseason is don't trade Trae Young. Don't take the bait and trade Trae Young. Kind of like I said, he's the best player you guys have had in so long. Don't trade him just because it hasn't worked out. I'm much more comfortable trading DeJounte Murray and Clint Capella and kind of trying to restructure the roster. Trae Young's still 25 years old. I'm still trying to look to reconstruct this roster around Trae Young. Do not trade him, Atlanta. It will be a great mistake. But overall grade, I'm going to give it an F. This is just a terrible year for the Hawks. For a team that was in the conference finals a couple years ago. It's crazy to think. Number 11, Brooklyn Nets, 32-50, F. Only thing I have to say. I ain't got nothing to say about the Brooklyn Nets. Blow it up. Blow it up. One thing I want to see them do, blow it up. there is no need to try to build a roster around Mikal Bridges because you have no assets to build that roster around him. You have no draft capital to go make any trades. You have young talent on the roster in Cam Thomas, Mikal Bridges, and Nick Claxton, but that's not good enough to even compete in the Eastern Conference. Like, they didn't even make the play-in this year. Blow it up. Blow it up. That's all I got to say. Brooklyn Nets, you should blow it up. This isn't even a conversation. F of a year. I'm surprised they didn't blow it up at the deadline. If I see this Brooklyn Nets team try to go into next season with this kind of same roster, somebody needs to go take a look at management. Somebody has to go take a look at management. Number 12, Toronto. Regular season 25-57. I'm glad they're going to get a very good grade from me. I have it at a B-. Interesting year because Scotty Barnes was hurt for the back half of it, but they went out and ripped the Band-Aid off. Traded Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. They brought in some assets. I love Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett next to Scotty Barnes. I like what they got going on over there. They have a draft pick, first rounder this year. I'm interested to see the development of Scotty Barnes and see what they do with him if they want to put him at more of like a point forward kind of role. And I want to see how his offensive game does grow. But I love Emmanuel Quickley. They're going to have to extend him this offseason. But you have RJ Barrett, who's still super, super young, wrapped up for the next 3 or 4 years. You could possibly still move Jakob Poeltl to get a better fitting big, probably that can give you a little bit more spacing next to a Scotty Barnes. So I'm going to say I'll give it a B- because I feel like they went and added and kind of like turned the table, got rid of Pascal Siakam, OG, got younger, got some draft capital. I'm very excited for the Toronto Raptors' future and what they do this offseason because they're a great ran organization. They seem like they always kind of find the diamond in the rough kind of players, and I feel like they're all on the right track and building a good team around Scotty Barnes. Like I said, I love Quickley. I love Barrett next to Scotty Barnes. 2 guys that can really be shot creators of their own, but 2 guys that have proven that they can play off the ball as well. I'm going to give it a B-. One thing I want to see them do, go add the key role players. I feel like this rebuild can be a little quicker than maybe people are anticipating, depending on the role players that they do add to this team. I feel like in key additions, they need to add some more spacing and shooting. But you also need to like not overflux the roster with like, I guess, too good of role players. If I'm trying to explain, like, they don't want to be to the point where like they were, because you don't want to hinder the young development of the talent that they do have. Go add somebody that, like how the Rockets did with Fran VanVleet. Not saying it has to be a guard or anything else. Like, go try to overpay for somebody that is such a good fit and can really help the development of your guys as a whole to really kind of speed this rebuild process up for you. Next one, 13 seeds, Charlotte Hornets. I'm gonna give it a C-. 21-61. The one thing I will say, kind of like the Bulls, one thing saving this grade is Brandon Miller. He has kind of taken that reign to where, like, oh, is Charlotte building around Brandon Miller instead of LaMelo Ball now? That's what I've been thinking about when I think about the Charlotte Hornets and who they are building around. But now you have LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, 2 great guys that you can really be the foundation of your franchise now. You have the 6th overall pick, which you can go draft another great fitting piece next to those 2. I think they need to go on and take the page out of the Rockets book and try to get some more veteran-like role players to see if they can make a push to go to the plan. So, like, looking at this team, I'm going to give it a C-. LaMelo Ball has to stay healthy for sure, but I'm going to give it a C- solely on Brandon Miller. And I got to give the Charlotte Hornets props. I was one of the people who was like, man, should have just took Scoot Henderson and worried about the fit later. Brandon Miller has had a way better start to his career than Scoot Henderson. Not saying Scoot Henderson's a bust by any means, but I am saying that Brandon Miller's start and his fit next to LaMelo Ball is so good to where I'm going to give this season a C-. Like I said, one thing I want to see them do, go get a culture setter, kind of like how the Rockets did with Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet. Go try to add some veteran role players if you got to overpay for them to just make your team better. When your team starts to get success, that helps the overall of the entire team and the whole outlook of the team. Like, when you look at the Rockets and the Hornets were in the same position a year ago. The Rockets just had a great year because they added actual veteran NBA talent. And then no wonder they got better. And no wonder they're in a way better position now. Obviously, Rockets have a ton of draft capital from like the Brooklyn Nets and everything else like that, and they probably have a more deeper realm of talent than Charlotte does right now at this point for sure, but Charlotte isn't as far away from being decent as people think. I think with LaMelo Ball, if you get a healthy season out of him and you get a healthy season out of Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, like if you go draft somebody like a Ron Holland, he's a great fitting piece, and what they do in free agency is going to be very interesting to see where this Hornets team goes next year. But I'm going to give it a C- for right now. Washington Wizards, I'm going to give it a D. This is the real first year of the full rebuild. You got a really, really disappointing year from Jordan Poole. Kyle Kuzma, it seems like he's kind of 1 foot out the door. I would be shocked if he's on the roster next year. I like what you have in Denny and Bilal. You definitely need to go get a big this offseason for sure, whether that's in the draft or through free agency and paying somebody. But one thing I want to see them do is this team is still searching for the guy for this unit. And when searching for the guy, it might take a couple years to find that. But I just think you need to kind of look at this draft, possibly get another first-round pick to where you can bolster up the roster enough for when you do eventually find that guy for you in this franchise, you already have a Denny, Bilal, a Jordan Poole, possibly a Rishad Shea, even like somebody like a Zach Edey. You need to bolster up this roster to where like when you do get that guy eventually down the road, you're not getting the guy and then you're still 5 years, 6 years away, if you know what I'm trying to say. You need to go try to get this roster good enough to where you're competing in games for sure, but to where you're also welcoming the door and making it easier on somebody that you do eventually bring in to be your guy to make it such an easier process for them. Washington Wizards, I'm still going to give it a D, but they need to kind of start tweaking the roster to where like you kind of have more of a direction. I feel like they have a lot of mixed bag pieces on this roster in the first full year of the rebuild, obviously, but they kind of need to really pick a direction and what they want to go in going forward. Last team, Detroit Pistons, F-. F-. They're at the point where we need to extend Cade Cunningham. I've already expressed enough on the channel about how I think they should explore trading Cade Cunningham because they are so far away. They need to go like try to be good this next year for sure. They do not have their first round pick next year whatsoever. I forgot what team it goes to, but they don't have it. They have the 5th overall pick this year. I would think about trading back to try to go get more assets for the future. And I feel like this is a draft where like you can trade back and still get somebody very valuable. They need guys that can contribute right away, right now. I think they're past the point of like trying to just get these super raw upside picks because like at some point like you're going to have to extend Cade Cunningham. Like you have a ton of cap space to go make something happen in free agency if you want to go overpay somebody. But this is a Detroit Pistons team that just fired Monty Williams too on I want to say the first year of a 6-year contract. So, like, at some point, they need to kind of turn the corner. They need to really improve the roster. This team has no shooting or spacing. They kind of have a bunch of guys that kind of do the same thing. I don't really know if Ivy fits this team, what they want to do anymore, depending on what they do in the draft. They have a logjam at the center position. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. I'm going to give it an F-. This is one of the worst seasons I've ever seen out of a basketball team in the NBA. It sucks because I'm a fan of Cade Cunningham. I just feel like this situation is just tough for him right now. But I feel like they have all the cap space. That's the one thing I want to see them do. Just go get better. You have all the cap space. You have draft capital in this year's draft. Just go get better. You don't have any reason to be bad next year anyways. You don't have your first round pick. Go get better fitting pieces. I don't care if you got to pay somebody. I don't care if you got to take a reach in the draft. Maybe get more NBA ready guys out the draft. Look to be better right now this year. So I'm going to give it an F-. After explaining all that, I'll run through all the grades I have for these teams for my audio listeners out there. Boston Celtics, obviously an A++, winning the title. Knicks, I'm going to give an A+. Milwaukee Bucks, I'm going to give a C+. Cavs, I'm going to give a C+. Orlando Magic, I'm going to give an A+. Indiana Pacers, I'm going to give an A+. 76ers, B-. Miami Heat, I'm going to give them a D. Chicago Bulls, giving them a C. Atlanta Hawks, I'm giving them an F. Brooklyn Nets, I'm giving them an F. Toronto Raptors, I'm giving them a B- because they kind of ripped the Band-Aid off rather than the Nets. Charlotte Hornets, C-. Got a star in Brandon Miller in the making. Washington Wizards, D+. And the Detroit Pistons, I'm going to give them an F-. This is wrapping up the official grades I have for the Eastern Conference teams. Episode for the Western Conference teams will be out right after this one. But thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk Podcast. Hope to see you tune in future episodes.